Hello, Empowered Woman. Welcome to this episode of the Empowered Woman podcast. Today I talked to Erin Berry, Women's Love and Pleasure Coach. Her title is pretty self-explanatory. She helps women find pleasure in everyday life by leaning into their feminine, awakening their sexuality, and finding ease and flow in building their business. We covered so much juicy stuff on this episode.
Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Empowered Woman podcast, the #1 show on personal growth, visibility, and profit for women entrepreneurs. If you're wanting to start believing in yourself, giving yourself permission to succeed, and let your voice be heard to make an impact in the world as an entrepreneur, this is the place for you. I am so glad that you're here. My name is Marta Spurk, and I'm your host, triplet mom, woman empowerment coach, and all things motivation extraordinaire. Welcome again, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yay. So much like the latest guest episode that we had here on the show, this is a do-over. Because of my storage, external hard drive issues, I lost Erin's. It's there somewhere. I just haven't accessed it yet. I lost Erin's first interview, and we were like, let's just do this again. And I'm excited because every conversation is different. And I know you've had quite a few speaking engagements recently talking about this very topic. And we'll talk about how you're going to be presenting more for the Polka Dot Powerhouse, the chapter that I'm in, and other local chapters here in Colorado. But anyways, I'm so glad to have connected with you through the years. And I love the work that you do also empowering women. So let's get down to it, Erin. Tell us who you are and what you do.
So I am a certified love, sex, relationship coach. I consider myself a pleasure priestess because I really feel like a big part of my work here is to remind people that pleasure is their birthright. Mm-hmm. I work with women mostly, but I do also work with men some, and then I work with couples as well.
I love that. And I want to dive into what exactly you do and how you help women with that. But I think an important part of this whole thing is understanding how you got to doing that. What sparked this? What really made you want to dive into this to the point where you're encouraging people and teaching them principles that are not very talked about or that are considered very taboo?
Right. Well, I think if I look back historically at my life, I've always loved to talk about taboo things.
Okay, good.
I like to bring the realism for sure. Mm-hmm. And my journey is kind of long and convoluted, but in a nutshell, I started my journey back in my 20s. It started around self-love. I had just gotten married the year before. The marriage wasn't right. So the timing of that was just really interesting. Lots of lessons learned. But it really led me on this journey of wanting to know more about intimacy and really what we're up to in relationship. I'd studied the philosophy of tantra through a yoga teacher training that I had done and really resonated with that. And then after I got divorced about 5 years ago, I really leaned into what it is that we're up to, how to communicate better, how to connect in these deep and vulnerable ways. And I just keep proving that really the sky's the limit. So I love teaching people now that I've figured it out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so awesome. And now that you mentioned Tantra, because I remember I'm in your mailing list, and I remember not too long ago, I know when it was that you sent out an email, what the heck is Tantra anyway? Because it's one of those things that people hear and it's like, I don't know what it is. And there's different ideas of it. So let's hear it from the expert. Tell us more.
Okay. Yeah. I think everyone hears Tantra and they think about sting, and that's about the extent of what they understand.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it is just this deeply sacred way of approaching sexuality. Mm. So it basically is seeing your partner and seeing yourself as the sacred. Mm. And it is a form of bringing consciousness to sexuality. So it's my favorite meditation. Mm. And it's very energetic in nature. So it takes it beyond just the physical into all of these other realms. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And trying to do it as short as possible, I'd say that's the main points.
Okay, awesome. So it is a meditation. So
I really believe it is, because you're bringing consciousness into sexuality. If you think about it, so many people check out during sexual practices. Yeah. This is deeply being fully immersed in all of the senses consciously in relating.
And you know what's interesting is that ever since me starting my business and diving more into it, and especially following experts that talk a lot about consciousness and intuition and being aware of yourself, stepping into the feminine, they start getting into how everything is one, right? And the way you show up in your business, it has a lot to do with different ways you show up in your life, including your sexuality. And something that I think has hit home for me, especially when it comes to receiving. And I would love for you to speak on that, because there are different ways of interpreting or explaining or defining like the masculine energy and the feminine energy. And oftentimes we feel like, and this is something I've learned from Gina too, I think we actually connected through Gina because we knew each other before I joined the Polka Dot Powerhouse.
Yeah, it was I remember connecting on Facebook a long time ago, but I don't know how that actually happens.
It's the mystery of the interwebs. So, but anyways, right. and Gina talks a lot about like the feminine and the masculine, and how many people think that the feminine is giving because women are so nurturing. But when you think yin and yang, and I don't know if I'm quoting her correctly, but I remember something along those lines of her saying the feminine is actually learning to receive. And when you think about the anatomy and sexuality, that makes a lot of sense as well. And so for me, the correspondence that I have understood from all of this in my business specifically, and I would love for you to talk about that specifically, since we're talking to women entrepreneurs, the majority of the audience here in the show, is that our ability to receive more money, our ability to receive abundance and more clients instead of being in the hustle mode, which is associated with a masculine, has a lot to do as well with our intimacy with our partners and how we perceive ourselves and our bodies. So your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's a pretty loaded question, but yeah, it's that's a lot.
Take your time.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say, and our intimacy with ourselves. Unless we have that, then we hold both the masculine and the feminine polarities within ourselves. I love this topic. It's something I teach about as well. And what happens, this is actually part of my speech for the Powerhouse, is about the masculine and the feminine energy, because the masculine is more of the push energy. It's also more of the container. So I like to think of the masculine energy as like the banks of a river, and the feminine flows within. And the feminine in and of itself, the energy is very wild, very flowy, super receptive, as you said. But our society has really conditioned us to be in that masculine, especially when it comes to business. I just actually had this experience yesterday. I was in a bit of push energy because I've got something coming up and it's all the last minute stuff for it. And I needed to rest. So I actually took myself skiing. And on the way up skiing, I got 2 referrals for this thing that I'm working on. So my experience has actually been that when I allow myself to be in the feminine, which it tends to be my natural set point. So I do want to say that too, because there's this idea as a woman, we're supposed to be more feminine. There's women out there that actually have more masculine energy. So it's not shooting over being one way or another. It's actually understanding where you fall on that spectrum and being in alignment with it. So when I get in alignment with my feminine, which is more of what I am naturally, everything starts to flow really well. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like you were saying, the yin and the yang, the yin is like the push energy, and the yin, that would be the yang would be like the masculine, and the yin is the feminine, softer, more gentle energy.
I love the analogy of the river and how it flows, but it's also wild. It's just it's such a beautiful description of women too, because there's these both sides, and also understanding that we host both of the energies. And something that you mentioned that was interesting to me was to say your default, or what's natural to you, is more of the feminine, and some people have more of the masculine energy. Curious if you, in your practice, in your experience, if you think this is something that we're born with, if it's more based on societal norms, conditioning, how does that show up?
It seems like it's more natural. It's how we come in here. Yeah. So at least that's been my experience. And the more I've learned about it, the more I've really come to understand that it's dangerous to be telling women they should be more feminine when that may not be their natural set point. So there are ways that you can figure out where you fall on the scale.
Okay.
And really it's about the polarity. So like I was mentioning earlier, we have it both within ourselves. So when it comes to our business, it's really important to figure out masculine energy and ways of holding our own container. So what of that masculine energy can we use to hold the container so that our feminine, the creative, what makes us amazing entrepreneurs in the first place, can flow within that containment within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I love what you said about you need to take a break. You honor that, and it actually worked in your favor. And that is something that I hear time and time again. And I notice it with myself, like, and people say this, and I notice it with myself too. My biggest and best ideas don't come when I'm actually working. Right. When I'm out and about, when I'm actually relaxed, when I'm not stressing over something. Why do you think it's so hard for us to lean into that? And I guess I speak for myself, or maybe for others, it is easier. Is it because of this culture that says we need to be more masculine? This is the way of doing business. And how can we combat that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it is probably more culturally than anything else. It depends on how you were raised, obviously, right. But it's this idea that you have to work hard to move forward. And really, I was actually up at these caves that I love yesterday. And I was remembering a couple of years ago being at those caves and saying to myself, I was trying to say, I want to work. What did I say? Smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
But I slipped and I said, work easier. And I was like, and I kind of, I started embodying that, and almost immediately things started to open up. So yeah, I think we have to actually look at like what we were told, where we're operating. Yeah. This actually reminds me of something else I was going to say from your original question. So many of us have issues around worthiness and deservingness that we're not even aware of. We've got pieces of our inner children and lost pieces of ourselves running our lives. Mm-hmm. And they keep us stuck. And, at some point they did protect us and keep us safe, but now they're keeping us from actually what we desire.
Yes.
So it's society, but it's also very individual in how,
right.
We were brought up and what we chose to believe about ourselves.
Right. And it all starts with that awareness. I remember when we had our first recording, our first conversation, you talked about easy ways to approach in your daily life, the concept of pleasure and understanding what that means. Because that's what I was going to ask you is, okay, so what are some practical things that we can do to start leaning into that? Like I can go and I take a break and go skiing because it's just too much. And then awesome things can actually happen. So if you can walk us through, because I remember you gave some specific ideas in terms of the pleasure, but also tips on how to lean into those nudges to slow down.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is with those nudges, it's like really being attuned to your nervous system. Like that's the thing I've really keyed in on in the last few years. And I feel like it tells you everything you need to know.
Right.
Because if you're in an activated state, that's a sign that something is stressing you out.
Yeah.
And that you're a bit off with whatever it is. So don't ignore those signs because they are very important. Mm-hmm. Pleasure, I consider it to be the salve of the nervous system. It's actually my personal favorite way of calming my nervous system. And when I say pleasure, I mean, I think everyone always thinks about sexual pleasure first, but really pleasure is available to us in so many ways in every area of our life and every moment. So when I say pleasure is your birthright, it's like, yeah, live from that place. So for me, it's like my morning coffee. I love coffee or basking in the sun. So it's about the easy and the simple pleasures, because I think we often think just in general that if we're going to do something, we should go big or go home. Like I look at this even around my yoga practice. Like I leave a yoga mat out and I hop on it and do a pose or two. Mm-hmm. I don't have to spend an hour of time doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's actually looking at how we can invite more pleasure into everyday life. Or I talk about in my speech for the dots that, so, some of the stuff we do is maybe not our jam. And as a business owner, you're wearing all the hats. Like for me, it's spreadsheets. I mean, I have a friend who's like, that is her jam. She showed me one of hers the other day and I was just like in awe of the beauty of it, but that is not me. You know what I mean?
I resonate.
Yeah. So when I'm doing spreadsheets, I could just sit here and be like, oh, I have to do this spreadsheet. But like the last time I did it, I lit a candle. I have this favorite candle maker and I lit that candle and I was evoking all of my senses. So I was seeing the light flicker. I could smell it. And then I had turned on some music and I was just allowing myself to kind of move in my seat and kind of just made even the mundane pleasurable.
Mm-hmm. So would you say, so this is making me think, because that's something that has been on my mind a lot lately, as I dive into, because, I talk a lot about the Enneagram and I talk a lot about personalities, and all of it started because I wanted to understand myself and how I'm such a driver and a always taking action. I probably am one of the people that has more of the masculine, maybe, I don't know. And to me, the idea of rest is very complicated because of the way that I operate. But I have been slowly shifting that, and it's made me feel more comfortable and embrace this idea by thinking about enjoying and celebrating. Because for me, resting is scary in a way because it's like I'm not producing because I'm just so focused on productivity. So when I think I need to be present, how do I do that? Instead of thinking about rest, which I know is important as well, thinking about enjoying. And that's what I thought of when you were saying I lit a candle and I was just, enjoying myself. Mm-hmm. Is that something that I could correlate to that and be like, all right, I am actually allowing pleasure in my life?
Well, I mean, I feel like you listened to my speech, even though you haven't heard it yet, because I do talk about celebrating. And I think it goes back to what I was saying before around shoulding. I think women in particular do a fabulous job of shoulding all over themselves, yes. And what does rest look like to you? Because rest to you is going to look different than it does to me. Actually, I just did a post about this yesterday. Like, you might see me skiing and think I am living a juicy life, but skiing for me is like the ultimate self-care. So rest, self-care, all of that is going to look different for all of us. Mm-hmm. So it's how do we figure out what works for us that feels good in our nervous system? And then, it's actually looking at when you rest and you start to feel that feeling or hear the conversation going on in your mind around, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. I should be doing all these other things. Like looking at that voice saying, thank you. I know you're trying to keep me safe or whatever it is, but I need this rest. And that, is the ultimate, version of self-care and self-love, really.
Right. And trusting yourself that it's safe to do that, knowing that everything is still happening. Nothing is going to fall apart. Because that's the impression that we may have at times, right? Is that if I take this time, everything else. And I even find myself at times, like when I'm done, I'm thinking, oh, but there must be something else that I need to do. It's crazy. And it's paying attention to that conversation. So I love that you said that. Any other tips on how to tune into that and to those nudges? Because I know people that talk about intuition and all, they say the more you listen to it, the clearer it'll get and the easier it'll get to pinpoint when it's talking to you and to follow that. So any tips on that front?
Yeah. Well, I am a very intuitive person who decided to ghost my intuition for a really long time. And really right now what I'm working on, and I think this goes back to what we're talking about around pleasure, because you feel pleasure. Pleasure happens through your body, not your mind. Mm-hmm. Like you can't think your way into an orgasm. Mm-hmm. You have to surrender. Surrender is a huge part of this. And it goes back to also attuning with the nervous system, because I really do believe that those two are very interconnected. Mm-hmm. But it's how things feel as much as how they look. So if you're trying to do something and on paper it sounds and looks amazing, but deep down in your body, there's some kind of physical reaction, that is a sign. Mm-hmm. So I love that. Yeah.
I started reading a book that talks about the 4 levels of consciousness. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I forget who it was that this lady wrote a book, but she was quoting somebody else that developed this and pinpointing the difference between your intuition and your ego, and when, they're talking to each other and how to understand which one it is and how to lean into it. And I love that you use the word surrender, because that's really what it is. And not being in your head, and that the answers are really in the way that you feel.
Yes.
And recently I've been having a lot of conversation with clients and even creating content around 6 figures and how there's this huge push, and it's very masculine as well, right? Of this is success. And then you hit it and it's like, this is not success. And this is something that I have been experiencing in my journey of having so many goals and working so hard towards them. And then when I finally hit them, I'm like, it's funny enough. I just remember this. I've actually been using the analogy to say, it's almost like losing your virginity. People think in the movies romanticize it, the fireworks are going to go off. Yes. And with all these other goals and things, it's the same thing. Like, it's not that goal that's going to make you feel good about yourself. you have to do that job. And it's a constant thing, and it's a daily thing. So the surrendering really reminded me of that. And okay, so back to my 6-figure thing. I was talking to a friend and she was saying, whenever I hear these things of, are you ready to have a 10K month? Or I just had a 60K week. And she's like, it feels weird in my body. And we were having this conversation and I was like, I'm so glad that you're saying this because it backs what I'm talking about. So it's not just me, obviously. And it goes hand in hand with if it feels that way, why do we trump that to what's on our minds? And it's just a really good indicator of what's running the show.
We're hardwired for it. We really have to look at it. I mean, you touched on the goal thing. I mean, for pleasure, the number one thing is being goalless. Granted, when you own a business, that's really hard. But one of the things that I've personally worked on and have helped a few of my clients work on and my friends work on is that even that has to feel good in your body.
Right.
Like, yeah, you can be pushing to make this money, but I think I just saw your newsletter come out this morning. It's talking about purpose driven. That's so important. Like, you have to make sure you're aligned with your purpose when you're doing it and that your numbers feel good inside your body as well. I'm sure you talk about that.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh, I love that. So not only the journey towards that thing, but how it feels to begin with. And I think, especially in the online space, there is a lot. And I see a shift. It's been shifting in the last couple of years. Maybe it's because I've been more attuned to it and I'm seeing it more. Who knows, algorithm? Or if it's because more women are rising up and bringing this to the awareness. But for the most part, it seems like there has been a lot of the focus on the hustle culture, whatever. I know it's super cliche and people talk about it all the time, but we end up borrowing people's definition of success and people's goals for ourselves. We don't even know if we really want that, but that's what they're saying that we need to think about and want. And so that's what we go for. And then we get that frustration of, I worked so hard for this and I feel numb inside.
Right? This isn't actually what lights me up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's really paying attention to that. Amazing. Well, before we do our little rapid fire questions, I do want you to, we talked about it already, but I do want you to tell us which chapters of Polka Dot, because I know several dots listen to this and it's coming up. So you're speaking to the Foothills in May, but you're speaking to another one. So let us know where you're going to be at and when and what exactly they can expect to hear from you.
So I'll be in Colorado Springs next week, which I'm excited because I have not made it to their chapter yet. And then, you guys in May, because I will be dealing with a retreat. I'll be on my retreat in April. So.
Okay. Amazing. That's exciting. All right. Well, let's go through our rapid fire and then you can let us know how to contact you, what all you got going on so that people can find you. So I use these 5 steps that are in my framework and I'll tell you the words and you let me know what comes to mind, whether it be a word or if you want to expand on it, if a story comes up, whatever happens, I'm always excited to hear. Ready?
Yes, ready.
All right. So first one is notice yourself.
Presence and ease.
Listen to yourself.
Trust your inner wisdom.
Forgive yourself.
Oh, so important. Ultimate self-care, self-love, self-forgiveness.
I love that. Ultimate self-care. Empower yourself.
If you're not empowering yourself, you can't expect anyone else to.
Yeah, that's right. It starts with you. And finally, transform yourself.
It has to be your way. You're your own special butterfly.
Yay. Oh, I love that so much. Yes. Butterflies. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Let us know how we can find you. And I'll put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah. So right now, my website, as we were discussing before, is under construction, but there is some information out there, including my program coming up and my retreat. And that's erinberrybliss.com. And then I'm out on Facebook as Erin Berry Bliss. I have a group called Pleasure Seekers, which is super fun. I'll send you the link for that. And then I'm on Instagram. I'm Erin Berry Bliss. There's an underscore in there. So check the notes. And Pleasure Priestess 111 is my other account.
Amazing. I love it so much. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for the do-over. Always so fun to talk to you. And I can't wait to see you talking in person.
Sounds good. Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to connect with Erin. All the links are in the show notes. And also join my Facebook group so we can stay connected, the Empowered Woman community. Make sure you grab a copy of the Empowered Woman book at marchasburke.com. And finally, take advantage of my free 30-day trial of my business and marketing school, the Empowered Woman School. You can activate your free membership at freegiftfrommarta.com. Until next time, bye.